friend.
Welcome to Heavy Metal
History.
How's it going, listeners? Welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal History, the podcast. If this is your first time checking us out, thank you so much for listening, and hopefully go back and check out some of our older episodes. This week, my guest was my old friend Scott Lewis from Carnifex. He came on to talk a little bit about the band, a little bit about our history together. We talked kind of about his beginnings in music and in bands, and like some stories that he had shared with me a few times, and we kind of talk about those. But like we've been talking about over the past couple months, I guess now, the main reason I wanted him on was to talk about his graphic novel Death Dreamer. Scott has written this graphic novel with artist Christian Dabari, and he's got Indiegogo up for it, and there's all kinds of cool things like t-shirts, posters, as well as the graphic novel itself. And we talk about him writing and making that, and the big artistic risk, I should say, that putting a lot of money into something like that is terrifying, as he explains it. So we talk about all that kind of stuff and go pretty in depth with it, and it was nice catching up with him, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this episode. So don't forget about our contest that we're doing. Share an episode and you can win an autographed poster. Just tag us in the post, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and that is it. So thank you for listening, and here is episode number 62 with Scott Lewis from Carnifex.
I wish I never had to write these words. Depression kills us all, but it's not our time to show. I know you wanna die, but just hang on.
Alright, man,
Cool.
So what we like to do to start off the podcast, and we'll start off with some music talk here. Influences, like those first few records that are kind of metal related that got you into the genre, like the first ones you remember buying, the first ones you remember hearing. What were some of those records?
I would say metal adjacent would be Nine Inch Nails, White Zombie, Marilyn Manson, Typo. Those were the bands that were, I guess, the extreme bands for mainstream, so grunge was the thing at the time. This was like mid 90s, I guess, 95, 96-ish.
Yeah.
And it was all about grunge, but then there was Nine Inch Nails and Manson and White Zombie, and those bands that were kind of that one more step. And those were the records I gravitated to that were eventually what got me to what came next, which was Cradle of Filth, Dimmable Gear, Fetus, Cannibal, Immortal, Dissection, Emperor, all those bands.
Yeah, isn't it crazy how just the notches just kind of, they don't even gradually turn up for a lot of people. It's just like you're already just trying to find the more extreme thing that you can once you've gotten like that small little taste of what it can be like.
Yeah, I think, for me, man, I don't know. I don't know if I was trying to go heavier or if I was trying to just go darker. I think that's more what I was looking for. I was just trying to find something that was just as depressed and as depraved as possible. And, when you see Cannibal Corpse's Tomb of the Mutilated cover, you're just like, all right, I found it.
Yeah, that was always...
And that was kind of what it was,
Yeah, because back then, like, same for me and you, like, there wasn't internet that was super prevalent, so you had to either, like, find something through your friends or look at it by the cover and just take a chance on it. Because I don't even think there was, like, those little, like, listening stations yet in a lot of places, were there?
No, listening stations came along, I guess, when I was in high school, so this was all 6th, 7th, 8th grade that I was transitioning into extreme metal. By the time I went into ninth grade, I was already fully, I looked like a Marilyn Manson, Cradle of Filth, Born in the Mall, goth baby, So I was fully indoctrinated by ninth grade. And I think all the listening stations had come along by then, like in FYE and Warehouse and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of how it was. By the time I was in ninth grade, it was just already full blown. There was no going back at that point.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's probably why school was as challenging as it was. I went in just as alienated as possible from everybody else. There's very, very few metal kids at my school.
Yeah, that was kind of the same way at my school, which is interesting because you would think that being out in California it would have been a lot more prevalent, but I guess punk was still kind of dominating, wasn't it?
There was a pretty good punk scene, and then there was a hardcore scene, but there wasn't like a metal scene. I guess there were the kids that were into Pantera and stuff like that, but I almost feel like Pantera's kind of was so big that they would just sort of get anybody to get a lot of jocks or like burnout stoner kids that was skater kids that were all about Pantera, but they didn't like know anything about metal, beyond Pantera or Metallica or Megadeth. It was kind of like, you try to show them a In Flames record and they had no interest,
Yeah, it's like a casual kind of listening.
Yeah, it was just, Pantera was cool and they were heavy, so they were, it's easy enough, but they didn't actually take the time to kind of go see what else was out there,
Yeah, that's true. I knew a couple kids like that in my school, but there's one kid that I made like kind of acquaintances with that like was always trying to get outside the Pantera box, so to speak, and I remember making him like this mixed CD or tape one day, and it had like Mortician and Morbid Angel and Carcass on it, and he was just like
Mortician.
Yeah, I know. He was just like, man, this is
the first
too much for
true
me.
Grievecore metal.
Yeah, and that fake ass drum machine too. They were like the pioneers.
Yeah, they were like
of that.
the original MySpace band.
That's true, but they were heavy. I will give them that.
Well, I had that tape where I can't remember the title, but I remember the cover. It was that chick chained to the tree, and then the guy with the chainsaw walking over from the barn.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember what that one was called either. I haven't listened to them in a really long time, to be honest. It's one of those bands that just kind of like fell to the wayside, and I don't really revisit too often.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Where it's like you had to check them out at the time, but that's not really wasn't really your taste.
Yeah, yeah. It's always interesting to me like the bands that really, really stick with you, whether it's through just nostalgia or you were at a certain place in your life and that album happened to catch your ear, got you through something, or the ones that like you were super into and then forgot about and they came back to again. Just that's always been my favorite thing about finding music or bands.
I did that with a brand new record not too long ago.
Which one?
What was it? The one with God and the Devil Raging Inside of Me. Is that what it is? That's kind of a weird title, but I think that's
yeah, the one that has like the Halloween costumes on it.
Yeah, it's got Jesus Christ on it, and it's got some. Yeah, I remember when that record came out, I was into it just because lyrically it was just so depressed. It's just great writing, I thought, and then somehow it came up on a YouTube autoplay, one of those songs, and I was just like, "Damn, that's a good record." Forgot how good it was.
Yeah, do you kind of, especially with like all the people that have been getting like hit with sexual harassment stuff and Jesse Lacey like kind of being one of those people, do you kind of do that thing where you're like, okay, that doesn't affect how I listen to it, or does it kind of like mar it a little bit for you, or do you just kind of like not pay attention to it or acknowledge it and still listen to it?
I had forgotten about that stuff with Jesse Lacey, actually.
Yeah, it kind of came and went, unfortunately.
Yeah, when you just said it here, I was reminded of it. I had forgotten about that. I didn't hear exactly what happened. I can't remember if this was about the same time the decapitated stuff happened or not, but I kind of remember hearing it, but I didn't ever actually research it. Maybe I probably should have. But the band's so inactive, I don't think they even responded to it, or maybe they did and I missed it. Frankly, the band had been off my radar. That's why I had forgotten about the record. But
yeah,
I did remember hearing a little bit about that, but I guess I didn't get the full scoop. But to answer the question, yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to think. I think it's true because honestly, I kind of got turned. Speaking of Pantera, I kind of got turned off of Pantera after that stuff came out with Phil.
Yeah.
So I guess that could be one case where that affected the brand new thing. I'd forgotten about why I was listening to it, but after the fact now, yeah, I'm probably gonna look it up and see what actually was said. I don't remember specifically. But I think it could. It can sour a good memory, for sure.
Yeah, it's always a hard thing to want to stop liking something because somebody in the band did something shitty, and I get where people are coming from with that, and I don't think it should necessarily ruin the music, but by all means, like, maybe not support the band. That makes the most sense to me. It also depends on like the severity of it too. Like, people fuck up and do things. I think what he was doing was kind of fucked up for sure, but I don't know. It's a weird fine line. Everybody plays a little bit of mental gymnastics, I suppose, with stuff like that, and myself included. So
yeah, you're right about that. Here's one I'll present to you because I was faced with this, and I kind of was reminded of it now that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Is I recently revisited American Beauty, and if I remember correct, that was a movie you really enjoyed, right?
Yeah, it was a good movie. Yeah.
So for me, American Beauty is it was a movie that I saw. I think I was 12 when that movie came out, and it really had a huge impact on me on what a film could be.
Mm-hmm.
And Alan Ball, the guy that wrote it, he went on to do 6 Feet Under, which I think we both really liked that show as well.
Oh, yes.
And True Blood. So he's a hell of a writer, and I've been following his writing ever since American Beauty. And Kevin Spacey's performance in that movie is one of his best. So I will say this, though, is that nostalgia won out, and I was able to watch the movie and sort of compartmentalize what had come out about him. And the mental gymnastics part is totally accurate. You kind of what I told myself was, this is not Kevin Spacey. This is a character that he is playing. This is not the man. This is just a character that somebody wrote that he's acting out. And so I'm just watching that character, and I'm enjoying that character in this context of this story. But I'm not co-signing or indemnifying Spacey, the person, in any way for what he did. So that was sort of the conclusion I came to.
Yeah, I can agree with that pretty along those lines too. I mean, I think the only thing in recent memory where I was just like, I'm done with this was that band Inquisition. I think all that shit was a little bit too much, and I was just like, I don't even want to listen to this anymore. Like, I just can't. But
I didn't hear of that. What happened with Inquisition?
He was arrested back in like 2005 for something to do with pedophilia and like child porn.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it was really gross and fucked up. He got kicked off that Satyricon tour and everything, so it was a big deal.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
yeah, I watched Baby Driver.
Some things are unforgivable.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, speaking of Kevin Spacey, I watched Baby Driver, and it was kind of right before all that stuff happened with him, and then not too long after it kind of came out, and I was like, man, like, I just saw him in that movie, and that movie was so good. And yeah, I guess it's it's one of those things that you have to recognize that they are playing a character, not being the person. So that's a good sentiment, a good way to put it. It's weird though.
Yeah, I mean, it's compartmentalization. It's probably a cop out, but it's reality, I suppose, to a degree.
Yeah. So, kind of going along with discovering music and everything. What was there like a record or something that you kind of listened to that made you want to start getting in bands, or was it just kind of like something you decided to do one day?
Yeah, it wasn't one record. I think it was a lot of. It was just, it was one thing I had the fortune of growing up with was the rock star, and I don't mean that in like the kind of what a rock star is now, where they really just party, but like Kurt Cobain, you know what I mean? Like he was alive, and Nirvana was a band, and Rage Against the Machine, Zach De La Rocha, like you had all these very iconic frontmen, and these guys that were not just vocalists and performers, but they were also writing these songs, and they had something to say. And all the grunge guys, Lane Staley and Scott Weiland, they're all these huge, larger than life personalities. And I think honestly it was those people that got me interested in even being in a band, and the concept of like, man, that'd be cool to make music and just do this, and I was always drawn to music as a kid. My mom played a lot of music in the house, often, so I grew up with music. She also played piano, so there was a piano in the house that she played regularly. So I think I had an attachment to music. I think it made me feel good at an early age, and so when I found music on my own, and then the people that I hung out with were other kids that really loved records, as few of them as there was a couple of them, and those kids were musicians. They would play guitar, they'd play the drums, or they would be in band, and so that's just sort of how I gravitated to being in and around people that were also making music, and then wanting to make music myself.
So I remember one time, we were talking, and you told me one of your first bands was like a more traditional kind of black metal band. And didn't you say that you guys played with like the original Under Oath lineup?
Yeah, so that was we played with Under Oath in the basement of a job employment agency in Fontana, California. It was when Under Oath was touring on Cries of the Past.
Oh my gosh, that is wild.
Yeah, and man, see, this, you think that I would remember like a monumental moment like that, but you don't know it's monumental at the time, right?
True.
I can't remember the name of that band. It may have been Bereaved. I think that was the name.
I think
Bereaved,
that sounds right. I recall that's what you told me. It didn't spark until you said it, and I was like, yep, that sounds right.
Yeah, so that was what year was that? That was probably 2002, something like that.
Yeah, it was a
while ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always crazy to me, man. Like you were saying, like when you're in it, you don't realize what it is until everything kind of moves forward, and you become what you are in your band now, and then they become what they are in their band now, and they could have never went past that point that they were at. And same thing with Carnifex. You could have still been in that black metal band. Like who knows? It's always really interesting to kind of see those things.
Yeah, well, I gave up on bands for a while too, because I dropped out in 2000, and then it was maybe even 2002. That makes sense. It was probably 2002. That was when I started trying to get serious about music, and I had that maybe 3 or 4 bands I tried to get off the ground, and the band that got the closest was this band called Incinerate. We thought we were going to get on Metal Blade, and we actually did some regional touring. But after that one fell apart, I don't think I did a band for almost 2 years. So, there was a moment there when I thought that I had my chance and missed it, and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be hard, especially when you keep putting in all this work into all these other bands and, like, maybe people aren't 100% as committed as you are, or, whatever varying kind of things happen with music and bands like that. It's really always out of everybody's control, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, finding like-minded people is probably the biggest challenge to a band. You get, and we even had those growing pains too with Carnifex. It was, we were a 4-piece when we started, and when everybody's just jamming and hanging out and you're rehearsing once a week, it's no big deal. But then when it gets to the point where it's like, okay, let's give up our weekends, and then it's okay, everybody put in $150 so we can get shirts made. Like, you start to weed people out, and which is fine. Not everybody's got to be want to try to make a career out of it or anything like that. But I just think as long as, if everybody just wants to do the jam on the weekend thing, then as long as everybody's on board with that, it's all good. And same goes for trying to be a full-time touring band. I think if that's what everybody wants, then it'll work. So it's just about finding those like-minded people, which is definitely a challenge.
Yep. It's definitely not for everybody, man. It can be really grueling. That's what I remember. I keep having things like pop up on Facebook or something like, oh, and this time like 8 years ago, and the Europe tour we did keeps popping up, and it's always every day it's just like, oh, no sleep again. I'm fucking tired, and like no sleep, no sleep, no sleep. And I'm like, oh my God, it sounds terrible when you're looking at it like that, but when I look back at it in hindsight, I was like, man, that was like one of the funnest things I ever did. But I guess I was just fucking tired all the time.
Yeah, I think for me, I've definitely tried to not get in that rut. I got in that rut where you just sort of like, you find what's bad about each day and just sort of gripe on that, but really that thing's pretty minor. I tried not to do that and really just try and find one good thing in each day, which you kind of need to, considering how much time we spend on the road. Otherwise, you'll just end up being a miserable person.
Yeah.
But yeah, trying to make the most of each of those days, even though they all sort of seem to blend into one, is pretty crucial to surviving as many years as we have out on the road.
So one thing I kind of wanted to like get with or figure out or talk about, I guess, with the band, kind of when I was touring with you guys, you were really pigeonholed to just like all these deathcore tours and stuff like that. And you guys, once you got Jordan in the band, you made a huge monumental sound shift. How did you guys kind of come to the decision to do that, and really, really break out of that box of what you guys used to be known as, which was like deathcore? Because now I don't consider that at all, especially after From Hell Chose Me On. Like, that's just silly to even call you guys that now, and people still do, I guess, but I feel like they haven't listened to any of your past 3 records, if that's the case. But did you guys all, I mean, I'm sure you had to have like sat down and been like, okay, this is where we're going to take this. How do we implement these things, with all these like symphonic aspects and keyboards and guitar solos? What brought about all these changes?
Well, I think it was a number of things. I think the most important one is, no one in the band is a trained musician. Nobody went to Berkeley. No one has a music degree. I think other than Jordan, I don't think anyone even barely took lessons. It's like, for the most part, it was, you just listen to a record and you try to sound like it. Sean's self-taught, Corey's self-taught, Fred's self-taught. I took piano lessons when I was younger, but other than that, all we all did was just listen to records. That was our training. So I think if I'm looking at the catalog sort of on a timeline, every record is us just becoming better at what we do by having more time to do it. And I know we're better songwriters than we were when we wrote Dead in My Arms.
Yeah.
We're better songwriters than when we wrote Hell Chose Me. And then by the time we got to Die Without Hope, we were just better songwriters. And I also think that, Dead in My Arms was a record we recorded in 2 days. And those were songs that Sean and I wrote in his apartment. And you want to talk about self-taught drummer, the guy is a self-taught guitarist too, and barely at that. And we just wrote that record by ear, you know what I mean? I don't mean to say he's not a good guitar player, but you know what I mean. We were just figuring it out. Literally.
Yeah.
There was nothing special about what we were doing. We were just figuring it out. And by the time we got to Die Without Hope, we had figured a lot more out. And also when we were in our old record deal, we didn't really have a whole lot of say in when we were going to release albums. And due to the budget and sort of the way it was rationed out, we didn't really get to have the amount of time we needed in the studio. So the only way we made any money was tour. So we're playing, 250 shows a year and somehow writing an album and then also somehow recording it. It's not very conducive to your best work, And by the time we got to Die Without Hope, we had the break. We took 18 months off from the road.
Yeah, I remember that.
And yeah, Sean and I were writing that entire time. We never stopped writing. I don't know why, because frankly, I thought our chances of coming back were slim to none. I went out and got a job. I had started pursuing another career path. So I think we were just writing for fun, and we were writing when we were inspired. And we took a huge break, the longest break we'd ever taken. And we kind of wrote Die Without Hope the same way we wrote Dead in My Arms, which was when we had time, and we just kept what sounded good, and we didn't record what we didn't like. And when it was ready, we went and made it, which is what we did with Dead in My Arms. And so we did that again with Slow Death. If you look at the timeline there, it was 25 months between the two albums, which is the longest we've ever taken before, and it's also a lot longer than most bands in our genre take.
Yeah.
And I think that record it was our highest charting. It was our highest selling. It was our fastest selling.
Wow.
It has outsold every record in the catalog except for Hell Chose Me. And it's only been out for 2 years. So I think it's sort of evident that when we are able to take our time and able to just have the time to go through the creative process of just finding good riffs and finding ways to put them all together, you just get better records out of us. That's why on this next one, it's not coming out till summer of 2019, and that's why our touring cycle ends August 18th, and we don't play a show for 11 months. This is just us learning about ourselves, which is we need the time to make a good record, and so we're taking the time.
Yeah, I remember kind of like that little hiatus there, and once you guys kind of came back with that next record, it was still pretty evident that you, like, the songwriting were leaps and bounds. Like, you guys put more work into it. Just with every subsequent record, it's nice, I guess, to have that time, because I think I've talked to this with other guys too, but if you rush something, you can tell when a band rushes something, and the end product is never good, or it's half good, and you can tell if you really listen to it, you can tell what's rushed and what's not. I think, anyways. I could be wrong there.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you, rushed. Maybe I would suggest inspired, because there definitely is cases when something can come together quickly, and you're like, man, why was that so easy? And I would call that inspired. So sometimes you can get great work quickly. So maybe not Rush, but I'll say you can tell when a record's not inspired. That's for sure.
Yeah. Either way, especially with having Jordan in the band, he added like a new level to it, and a different kind of playing style as well. And his writing, added a whole lot to everybody else, and it kind of elevated everybody along with him. And that was apparent, once those records started getting out there too. And I think where you guys are at right now, it's with all these little like. I love the symphonic elements that you guys have added to it. I think that kind of breaks you guys out of the mold of a lot of things, but you're still using influences from pretty much everybody in the band. You can tell like who's into the more blackened stuff and who's more into like the death metal stuff and shred stuff, and it all comes together in like one little cohesive package, which is nice. And it sounds different than a lot of other things, and that's hard to do nowadays. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, it's funny. The only deathcore bands left standing are it's Whitechapel and Die Hard. I guess they're more part of the second wave, but yeah. And what's cool, honestly, is that all three of us are pretty different. I guess Whitechapel and Die Hard have their similarities, but for the most part, we're all pretty different. Everyone kind of has a different point of view, and the image is a little different, the look's a little different, the artwork's a little different, the music's obviously different. So I think everything's it does settle in a good place. Everyone found their niche. And, the bands that were inspired, which I would say, there were deathcore bands out there that wrote great music. And there was a lot that didn't. But, I think the ones that were truly just, they arrived at that style of music because that was just the amalgam of their influences, which is the case for us. When we started, deathcore wasn't a word. There was no scene in 2005. It was a very different scene, and it was definitely not blast beats, I assure you. And we just arrived there because that's just the music that came out of all of us jamming together. And I think that was true. That's probably true. Well, definitely true for Whitechapel. They were right there with us at the same time. And I would say that's true for Die Hard. It was just, that's what happened. And I think when you have people that are just expressing themselves naturally, then you get great albums and you get bands that outlast a trend, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it does seem like that trend has settled out within the past few years, but there was that point in time where it was just like flooded between like 2005 and 7, maybe even 8. It was just like everything was like that, and there were a lot of bands that were starting to sound the same, and there was no like differentiation between the two. But yeah, now that we're in like 2018 and you can kind of see who's still around and how different everybody sounds, like you were saying, I don't know, the deathcore thing is a weird genre delineation to me. Like, it shouldn't, just because it has like a breakdown doesn't really, I don't know, it's a silly thing. I'm like really I've been really like anti-genre the past few years. It's like it's death metal, it's black metal, thrash. Like, you don't need to subgenre everything. Like, it gets a little out of hand for me at that point.
Yeah, I'll agree. I guess yeah, you can think of it as sort of, I mean, we're a product of death metal, whether you want to call it death metal or not, so it's like, maybe if you go through with a fine-tooth comb, there's tech death and there's melodeath and there's deathcore. It's like, yeah, there's these derivatives, but we're all under the umbrella of death metal. So
exactly,
I'm fine with that. I kind of stopped worrying about it, honestly.
Yeah,
we're just writing the songs, and they are what they are at this point,
Yeah, no, I agree, man. But that's I think it's a lot of kids that are kind of like worried about stuff like that, whereas like people our age are just like, whatever, man, it's music. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, we still get it though. You
yeah.
know? Even when we did Summer Slaughter, you still get it. People giving us the bird, and one guy. I remember we were in Baltimore at Ram's Head, and this guy just starts screaming out, Black Veil Brides, emo, and all this shit. I was just like, what is this guy even talking about?
Jeez.
It's like, man, you are detached from reality. Okay. Meanwhile, we're touring On Slow Death, and I think we were opening with Drown Me in Blood. And so we played that, and after that, he screamed Black Veil Bride. So I guess he's never heard Black Veil Bride.
Yeah, right? I was like, what? That's such a misnomer.
I know, I'm just like, that song literally couldn't be any different than that band, but okay.
Speaking of like crowd heckling and stuff like that, if you would, do you mind sharing that Ralph Santalla story that you posted about? Because I think, with him passing, that's such a good story about that guy. And one thing that I always remembered from like touring with him was that moment. And, I think I would want them to hear about that story because it's such a good story.
Yeah, shit, you were there.
Yeah.
And if I'm remembering, you had the night off from the table because the draconian Live Nation staff was selling shirts for $200 a piece up front, right?
Yeah, they wouldn't let us sell our own merch. Scumbags.
Right. For a small fee, of course.
Yeah, right?
That tour, man, you remember that tour. So speaking of being a maligned deathcore band, 2008 was when the battle lines were drawn.
Yeah.
Deathcore, I think, was definitely on full display. Pretty much every deathcore band that existed seemed to be on tour, and they were all putting out records. And it was very much pick your side in 2008. I think it kind of got to a fever pitch where even admittedly there was a lot of deathcore bands, so I get why people got frustrated. But so I think to have us on that tour, which was, Obituary was absolutely legendary.
Yeah.
I think they're definitely having a resurgence right now.
Big time.
Sort of well, not a second win because they've been around so long, but they're doing very well lately. But at the time, I think they were kind of in a lull, so to speak, and that tour wasn't doing especially great. And so you had that stress there, and then I think that crowd, especially with Unleashed as a support band, they were just the crowd. We were not the band that they wanted opening their show. Not the bands, but the fans of those bands. And there was a lot of anger towards deathcore, and it just, we saw it on display. And that was the tour that we got the most heckled on, for sure.
Yeah, like it was almost every other night, without fail.
Yeah, it sucked. It wasn't fun.
No.
Not to mention that tour didn't do especially well, and our at the time agent was stealing from us. So yeah, that tour was not great. But the Ralph story, that was a pretty memorable night, I think, for a lot of reasons. Some things I won't talk about here, but
totally.
You were there. It was an interesting night. But it was cool to see a guy in a headliner, in a band that had a bus, which was a big deal at the time. And they had crew,
Yeah.
Wow, a band with crew. That was like a new world for us. We were playing all these Live Nation venues, and everything was very professional, And to see Ralph do that early in our career with touring with big bands, I think made a big impression. We could have very easily toured with a band that were complete pricks, and that's our impression of professional touring. So I guess we all got to be pricks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't Ralph, and honestly, all the guys in Unleashed and in Obituary were all very welcoming.
Oh yeah, they were all so cool.
Yeah, so it was an interesting contrast that I think these fans probably, they couldn't. I think they would have been shocked to see how open and welcoming the bands they were a fan of to the band that they hated, us. It was kind of the contrast between how the crowds were treating us and how the bands were treating us was pretty vast. But heckling aside, that tour was great. Ralph was a fun guy to hang out with, and he made that tour really memorable. And yeah, I hope I hope he's having his peace now.
Yeah, that was a bummer, man. I couldn't believe it. And then Frank too, like passing away like a few years back. So that's like 2 guys from Obituary.
Right. Yeah, man. I mean, those guys went hard. You
Yeah.
know, and it's kind of like we've seen it. Shit, we lost a band member to something not too different.
Yeah.
Not a death, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think Tim from Within the Ruins, he recently sort of retired because of health concerns, and it's a tough grind, man. Tour's tough. It's tough on you mentally. It's tough on you physically, and if every night's Friday night, man, they start to add up,
Yeah, and it's good to stop while you're ahead. I mean, I guess that's a good thing for like you and Sean. You guys have always been like, straight edge, whatever you want to call it. You don't drink, you don't do drugs. So luckily for you guys, you don't have to worry about that. But, everybody else that parties a little too hard every now and then, it'll wear on you.
Yeah. Some of these guys, I'm just like, man, I'm like struggling to keep my shit together. Without getting blackout every night, or
Right.
getting spun till 9 in the morning. So it's like, hats off to you if you can do it. I can't.
So one last music thing here, and then I do really, really want to talk about Death Dreamer because that's the whole point of us doing this. But also wanted to get some music talk in here. Speaking of 2008, man, I know you don't like talking about your early records too much, but same thing with when I talked to you guys last. Disease and the Poison just turned 10. Can we just talk about it for a little bit? We don't have to go super in depth in it, but I know it was a bit of a quick one with that record too, wasn't it? Especially your first one in Victory.
Yeah, that record, it's got a lot attached to it. And there's 2 ways to look at it. One is just to look at the music at face value, which me as the artist, I shake my head and think of all the things we could have done better. And I think I look back at our process and I go, oh man, didn't have a clue, did we? So there's that aspect of it where the artist in you goes, man, if we could only, it's like we had some good ideas here, we just didn't execute them very well. But so there's that part of it. That's kind of my artistic critique on the album. But if I look back to just look at that time as a whole, it was the first one on Victory, and they wanted a record as quick as possible. 2008 was the year of deathcore, and they had to put out their quota of deathcore records. So we were one of them. So get it out there. And they scheduled us in a studio. We did the record with Zeus, and it was a last-minute scheduling. So we were sort of sandwiched between 2 other albums that he was doing. And so it wasn't the best experience as far as going in to do a record that was pretty big, our debut for a major label. It wasn't the best studio experience. We weren't prepared. We didn't really write that great of an album, in my opinion. And I added it up one time. I think that year we played something like 280 shows or something crazy, So we were extremely busy on the road. Last minute to the studio with a producer that was already overbooked, and the label wanted it now. No time to work on the mix, no time to do the artwork, no budget for artwork. Just get it out there. So that's what it was. It was a whirlwind of a time. We were living on the road, literally. I did not live anywhere at the time. We just toured. Those were some years that we really cut our teeth doing the grind,
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's when I met you guys, so it's been a decade now.
Yeah, and people asked us, are you doing the 10-year thing? And no, the answer is no. And the reason is just as a musician, as a performer, to the thought of doing a month of that album front to back, I wouldn't enjoy that. I just wouldn't. And maybe that's selfish, but that's the reality. Like, I don't see myself being excited to go play Dead in My Arms front to back for 5 weeks. It's just not where we're at. It's like, I think that whole, other than, and this is not shade thrown at Whitechapel, because I don't think they're doing this. But I think for the most part, when bands do the whole let's do our 10-year album thing,
mm-hmm.
it's kind of a chance to go back and find some relevance. Like I said, that's not shade at Whitechapel. They're not doing that. I'm not suggesting that for them. But it seems like that sometimes, kind of in general. And for us, thinking, going back to Obituary, talk about second wins. I mean, we're having a second win right now, and our latest records are our highest streamed or best selling. Our latest tours are our highest, most ticket sales. So I kind of don't see the need to go just play something that's very old and personally not very exciting to generate business. We're just focusing on what's ahead of us, which is what's right, the best record we can for summer of 19.
Yeah, because I feel like if you guys were to do that, that would just be like taking 3 steps back to just play that record. It's fine to bust out a song every now and then, but the whole record front to back, like just go listen to it. If that's how much it means to you, just go listen to it.
Yeah, listen to it, enjoy it, love it. Yeah, God, I could not. I mean, Among Grim Shadows, give me a break. I'm never playing that song ever in my life.
Yeah, no, I that's, the kind of thing with the podcast is like, history, like little moments like that. And I think 10-year anniversaries they're important and worth mentioning. So it's kind of why I wanted to like talk about it briefly, just to, because like I said, that's when I met you guys. It was the summer of 2008. We're on that Kill Whitney Dead tour, and that your record just came out. So it feels like a lifetime ago, but it wasn't really that long ago.
Yeah, a lot's happened.
Yeah,
for sure.
Again. All right, man. Let's talk about Death Dreamer, because this is my favorite part. Because I love comic books a lot, and also, if I'm not mistaken, because I know you've regaled me with stories about when you were working in a mortuary. Now, is this still kind of in line with like that early kind of story you showed me like a long time ago, where you were trying to like write about working in a mortuary but making it a little bit more fictionalized?
Yeah, so of course you heard the stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably told you a bunch of stories on tour, but yeah, when I started trying to write it, I really got into writing like narrative when I was kind of going through some stuff. So I think it was kind of just therapy. I think I was just trying to talk to someone. Uh-huh. I didn't really have a whole lot of people to talk to. So just sort of by creating narrative and creating characters, you sort of can express truths about yourself in a very hidden way. And I think at first I was kind of just, I don't think I had a destination. I was sort of just writing. Mm-hmm. And what you read, it was basically like a revisionist history, so to speak, some sort of fiction injected into memories, but didn't really have a narrative arc. Everything related to this story, mm-hmm. I think it was a way for me to realize I really needed to form a narrative. And it was only when I wrote it as a television pilot that I really injected the amount of fiction that I did. And I definitely depersonalized it and took a lot of the very specific things to my experience out, and just let the characters be more interesting, and really just let them take on a life of their own, mm-hmm. rather than trying to mirror it to any actual experiences. And what it evolved into was really just using the mortuary as a plot device and story engine to a degree, but also just an interesting backdrop for just kind of the classic crime thriller that I always liked.
Yeah, I agree. That's a very good one, man, because you don't really see a lot with mortuaries, but everybody knows that they are, kind of death personified a little bit. It's there all the time, and you only have like that one set of like doctors or I guess coroners and helpers in there, and to be around that all the time is, and to use that as a backdrop, that's very rare. I've not really seen that except for like 6 Feet Under, and that was like a mortuary home kind of deal. So is it like kind of like that same thing, or is it like a more like...
No, so well, it's funny. I should send you it. I have the whole book on PDF. I should have sent it to you prior so we could have talked about it a little more.
Yeah,
Wish I would have thought of that. No, so yeah, 6 Feet. You're right. 6 Feet Under was a fantastic show, and it was about a mortuary. But I would say, other than being about mortuary, that's kind of where it ends.
Yeah.
That was like kind of a traditional style funeral home where the undertaker, the mortuary manager would live actually there, and they would be able to go and do pickups 24 hours a day because they live right there at the facility. That's kind of how they do it at some mom and pop places. Maybe I don't know how many people live, how many actual funeral homes there are where there's actually people living on site. But for the most part, death business is super fucking corporate. There is huge conglomerates that own giant chains of mortuaries, and it's very corporate. And that was the type of place I worked for. They were owned by the biggest corporation in the death business, and they owned thousands of mortuaries across the United States. So it was very much all about dollars and cents, and it was a business. It was not this sort of the way it's presented in 6 Feet Under, this very hands-on personal approach where everybody is very connected to the bodies that are coming through there. It's kind of the opposite of that.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that's... I guess, I haven't had to deal with death, so I don't know exactly how expensive it is, but I've heard, it's just like thousands and thousands of dollars because you're paying for, caskets, the plots, whether or not they're going to get cremated, all that stuff just costs so much money. And I've heard that it's kind of like a big business, but I guess you clarified that a little bit more for me now, which is good to know.
Yeah, and I address it in the book as well. It's that plays a role in the point of view of one of the characters that works there. Kind of is part of his worldview and his motivation for his actions. So it's addressed in the book too. I think I tried to use it as a chance to sort of edify people in a way of kind of what this world is. It's very much not a hands-on, everybody's special. It's a factory. Kind
of off topic, but also on topic for a second. Did you happen to see that movie Best Friends with Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero?
No, I didn't.
It's okay. So it's about these two guys that work in a mortuary, and they start stealing like all the gold teeth and stuff like that, and selling it for money. And it's like this kind of crime drama thriller. It's hard to explain because it's Tommy Wiseau, so I don't know if you've ever seen The Room or aware of The Room and how ridiculous it is, but it's... If you get a chance to see it, go see it. I think you'll enjoy it. But
okay, yeah, I'll check it out.
So what was... From going from a TV script, what was the decision to turn this into a graphic novel? Because it seems like you still wanted it to have a visual medium involved for it, which is, I think, important, instead of it just being like a flat out story that people read.
Right. Did you watch, I'm guessing you watched the pitch video?
Yeah. Yeah, I checked out as much as
Okay,
I
cool.
could. I saw like all the images you had up, all the merch stuff, everything like that, as much as I could.
Word. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of To follow up on that is, yeah, we had to change some things in order to adapt the medium. There was some things in the original script that it just sort of didn't carry over for a panel, the way a panel expresses it. Um, so I still want it to be a television show. I still think it would be served best as a television show. But the reason to do it this way is, the TV show, you got to get a yes, and those yeses are really hard to get.
Yeah.
You got to get funding and a lot of other things that are really out of my control. And so, doing it as the graphic novel enables the story to live in more than just a PDF on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets the story out there in a very exciting way that I didn't anticipate, but I'm actually really happy for, because I think it really made the story actually better. In going through all these panels with Christian, and as he sketched the whole thing out, I really had to go through a creative process of asking myself, kind of directing the script in my mind, so to speak, as far as what we're choosing to show and how we're showing it. So that process actually made the story a lot better, and I ended up rewriting a fair amount of the dialogue once I had all the panels. So it kind of was this pleasant surprise where, even though initially I didn't think, I didn't think that the story would be as elevated with the comics as it would with the TV show, but it ended up actually getting much better by being expressed with the comic. So that was an exciting thing, and I think it really ended up working out really well as a book, better than I anticipated.
I think it's a good idea to actually have the comic before it gets made, because if you look at a lot of stuff, especially on TV, like comic books are a hot property right now, man. So to kind of have that first and it eventually like make it into a TV show, I think that's like prime for something like that.
Yeah. On the business side, it creates an IP, which something, an IP has value, a document doesn't. That's kind of the saying. So, I think the hope is that it does well on the crowdfund, well enough to get noticed, not only by a publisher to be able to do the rest of the series, but also hopefully to one day see it as a show. We'll see what happens. I think it'd be really exciting to be able to finish the story as a graphic novel. I think, regardless of what happens with the TV show.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed people like the first one. I'll send you the PDF and you let me know what you think. Maybe you can put a little review on the end of this thing.
Yeah, actually I can do that. I do reviews on like our website and shit. So like, cause we get like advanced shit like all the time now for records.
Yeah.
So you
Just don't give it to anybody.
What's that?
Just don't give it to anybody.
Oh, no, I don't do that. So you were talking about having to redo the dialogue, and this is one thing I definitely learned when I was still try to like write comic book scripts. You like the amount of stuff that you can put in a panel is so much smaller than what you expect, and it's hard because you're trying to get a certain point across, or expositional dialogue, and if you have too much word bubble in there, it takes away from the visual aspect of it, and trying to like get this little puzzle going from a script aspect is so hard. So how much was Christian's input able to help you out getting those pieces fleshed out with like dialogue and art and everything like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, his expertise was crucial, no doubt, and I kind of did some directing from the page in the script, so to speak, as far as specificity in how we're seeing a certain scene or situation. So I think he did a great job of translating that into the panels, and there was a lot of panels that he did his own thing on, and he nailed it perfectly. And then on specific moments, we would get together and talk about, if there was a reveal or a bigger moment in the script, we would get together and say, how exactly do we want to show this, or what's the most impact, and bounce ideas around. And so it's definitely very collaborative. And he was also working on adapting another feature script for a horror movie as well. So he had just come from a job where he had been working from a film or television script as well. So he was kind of, I guess, prepared for it in a way. And really, it seemed like he handled it pretty seamlessly.
Nice. Yeah, that's always good when like everybody's on the same page with that stuff, especially in a collaboration effort. Because there's, this is just stuff I've read, but there's artists that want to just do what's in their head and not worry too much about what the writer wants. But then there's writers who are like, no, you have to draw exactly what I want. And everybody's different, everybody's process is different, so it's good to see that you guys were on the same page with that stuff. And it shows with a lot of the stuff that I saw, like with the images and everything like that. It's got who did the coloring on the book? Was it him as well?
No, that was Simon Goff.
Okay.
He out of the UK, and he colored the book, did all the colors except for the cover that was illustrated and colored by one person.
It's got a very atmospheric kind of look to it, if that makes sense. Everything seems to be in like the same color palette a little bit, with little tangents here and there, but it's a good color palette. Like that's always the hardest thing to me, and I nitpick things like that because doing graphic design stuff, it's like if a color like just doesn't like match. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but yeah, I noticed that there's like a really solid color palette all throughout the book, and it gives it like this really nice atmosphere to it. Creepy atmosphere.
Yeah, what's funny is I never thought of it as a horror or suspense book, so to speak, until our publicist read it and some other people read it, and they're like, yeah, this is a horror book. I was like, really? I always just thought of it as like a crime thriller, but I guess the genres can definitely get blurred. I think what I say, horror with a plot, was kind of what I threw out there in the video, and that it's just kind of it has that tone that you're talking about, that is a lot of continuity beginning to end, and it does sort of give you that horror or creepy vibe, sort of sets up what you're going to see and read on the page.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this, especially with movies, because we were talking about Silence of the Lambs, and that's pretty much like a crime thriller to me. But he was like, well, no, that's a horror movie. And I really thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, oh, you know what? That's actually a really good point. It kind of is a horror movie because of all the kind of unspeakable things that happen in that movie are horrific. So I can see it as a horror movie, and I can also see it as like a crime thriller, movie like that as well. And they're kind of intertwined a little bit if you look at it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Silence of the Lambs, that's another great movie to look to. Where, I mean, come on, when the guy puts the face of the paramedic on.
Oh, man.
That's a horror. That's like a horror scene. So I think Seven too. I mean, is Seven horror or is Seven crime thriller?
Yeah, it's a good point. There are some horrific moments in that movie for sure.
Absolutely, and that is exactly where this sits. Where it's not horror in the sense as it's Freddy Krueger or Jason.
Yeah.
But it's horror in those that it has that it's centered around horrific moments, but it's very much a thriller, So I think it's kind of the way you tell it. I think in kind of a traditional horror movie, the deaths might be a little inconsequential,
mm-hmm.
and it's more just about how brutal they can be, rather than who they're to and why. Whereas in movies like Seven and Silence of the Lambs, they're horrific, but who they're to and why are also a big part of the narrative. And it's the same for this. There is these horrific moments that could be out of a horror movie, but who they're to and why is also examined, which maybe isn't as much examined in a traditional horror movie.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it does seem like with slasher movies, the deaths are fairly inconsequential. It's just like, oh, when's the next one going to happen? You don't really care about the characters or why they're dying, as opposed to like a kind of crime thriller where it's like, well, this person didn't really deserve to die, or, you know, there's repercussions to those kind of deaths in that sense.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it fits right in with that. It's that same sort of thing. It centers around horrific moments, but it's more sits in the crime thriller genre.
Yeah. So how long you been working on it? Like as far as writing and, you know, getting the art all together and everything like that?
Well, I probably spent, you know, almost a year and a half working on the script. And then the idea to do it as a graphic novel was slow at first because I was having a hard time finding artists.
It is hard.
It was kind of ironic. You have like all these comic book guys that, I think for the most part, a lot of them really struggle to get paid well. And, you know, kind of like graphic design people.
Yeah.
Like if you're freelancing, like everybody wants something for $50, you know? So I was really reaching out to artists to, you know, let's do a whole book here. And I was really just hitting a lot of dead ends. It was a little bit in contrast to what I was anticipating, because by no means was I asking people to work for free, or not even, you know, it was a good paying gig. So it kind of stalled out at first because I was having a hard time finding artists. And then through Twitter, of all things, I was able to connect with Christian, who had a job, but they changed their schedule, and he just had this like 2-month opening. And so when he and initially when I had asked him, he had said I'm not available. And then like 2 weeks later, he hits me back on Twitter. He goes, "Hey, that job actually got changed. I got time. If you want to do it right now, I can do it."
Wow.
And it was kind of like, all right, you know what? This is it. Because, you know, his art was amazing. And after talking to him and seeing his other influences and the type of stories that he liked, I was like, man, it would have been awesome if he could do this thing with me. So when his schedule opened up and it was kind of this, you know, now or never moment, I just had to go for it. So we went for it. And, man, it's been kind of scary because, you know, Christian's a professional, and the book costs a lot to make. And, you know, I was happy to pay him, of course. It works every dollar, but still, it was a big investment, not just for him, but for the other guys that worked on the book. And, you know, as a touring musician, I don't make a whole lot, so it was definitely a lot of nerves and going, man, I hope I'm doing the right thing here. I hope this isn't just me smelling my own farts, thinking that everybody wants to read what I'm writing. But, you know, we tried to make something cool, tried to make something that's visually exciting. And I think we were able to do that. And it looks like people are into it.
Yeah, with creative endeavors like that, where it's all coming from your own pocket, it's so scary, you know, because you don't know what's going to happen. Are people going to be receptive? And that's good to hear that people are. I don't see why they wouldn't be, you know, because everything to me looks really good, really cohesive, and I don't know, but people are picky. That's the other thing too. But yeah, man, dumping all your own money into like one personal project is terrifying. So
scary as hell.
Yeah, I commend you for doing it.
Especially too, because we're on the big break. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the band has like a year off after the summer tour, so you know. It's kind of this, kind of holding my breath, you know.
Yeah, so you got the Indiegogo up for everything, tons of like really cool merch packages and options to get different stuff.
What did you think of the cover art?
I liked it. I like it a lot, man. Seriously. Yeah.
It's funny. I think you were probably around like all those years when I was like, you know, trying to put shirt designs together and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I wonder, it probably falls in line with something you would expect to see from me.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I definitely thought, like, even if this wasn't a graphic novel, you could still use it for something else Carnifex related.
Yeah, right? So it's like it's almost, you can see the connection.
Yeah. But that's good. I mean, you have a style that you're drawn to, and I think that's important as well, because it has to resonate with you just like it does everybody else, I think.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Well, cool, man. I don't want to take up any more of your night here, but what else would you like people to know about the graphic novel that maybe we haven't touched on?
Well, I mean, if they like true crime, if they like neo-noir, if they like Dexter or Breaking Bad or True Detective, Seven, Silence of the Lambs, all that stuff we talked about, this is right in there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like that stuff, you'll like this stuff. Hopefully they can get the book, and if they got a few extra bones, grab a shirt. That would be awesome. All of the $30,000 is really just going. That's what the book cost. The book was expensive to make, and we're not able to get it printed yet, and we're waiting until we get a little bit more here to be able to get it printed. So we should be good to go soon as far as figuring out exactly how many copies we got to print and all that stuff. So hopefully everybody can jump on it, and we can hit our goal. And really what I'm waiting for is I want to hear everybody's feedback. I just want people to be able to read the thing, so they can hopefully have a good time with it.
Now, are you printing these to order, or are you just like doing X amount no matter what?
Well, we were thinking of printing 1,500, so that's kind of the goal, is to get all 1,500 sold, and so that's the target right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've only posted about it on our Instagram, but I definitely I'm gonna start spamming it on all our other shit too, to get people to actually go be able to buy stuff for it now, because we've just been kind of like talking about it at the beginning of the podcast, like, yeah, just go sign up for the mailing list, and when it's ready, like, you guys will know. But now that the Indiegogo is up, I definitely got to get people to start going to click on it.
Cool. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, man. I like I said, I thought it was really cool that you were doing a comic book. I mean, it's 100% up my alley. So I was like, fuck yeah, I'm into this. So I'm looking forward to reading it. I hope everybody else is too. And yeah, man. So like, you guys are taking a year off and finishing up this new record.
Yeah. We're we got a special announcement, a special show coming up that we're actually announcing tomorrow.
Okay.
When does this go up?
Monday, so a little less than a week.
Yeah, so we're playing with Testament at Comic-Con.
Oh,
so that's
shit.
going to be July 19th.
Oh my God,
yeah,
that's fucking
so
sick.
we're announcing that tomorrow. That'll be July 19th. It's kind of the unofficial launch of the release of the book as well. And then we go to Europe for a couple weeks, and then that's it. We work on the record, go record in January, and it'll be out in the summer.
Awesome, man. That's damn. I really wish I could be there for that. That's fucking sick. I've never been to a Comic-Con,
we're pretty
though.
excited about it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this year. It'll be a fun one.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for doing the podcast, first of all, and also it's been good catching up with you. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Cool.
Be excellent to each other.
And party on, dudes!